How are we doing, everyone? That's my finger. Ow. Now, I have been waiting for quite some time to get this type of fish onto the channel, and finally the shop has got some in, and we'll talk about it as we go through the video. They're not quite the species I wanted, but they are one of the world's smallest cichlids, and they live in a shell. Very, very strange thing. Let's get this built. Now, as I mentioned, the species that is going to go into this tank isn't quite the species that I was originally looking for, but that species is really hard to get hold of. I've spoken to a few shops and a few have had them and they're miles away and they've been able to get males and not females or whatever. And I'll be honest, I did have a sort of thought of, well, hang on, if I'm finding it hard to get them, all of you will be finding it hard to get them. And what's the point of showing off a fish that no one can get or are going to find it really hard to get? So with this tank, I thought we'd start with the foundations. And actually, this little fish I have never kept before at home. Loads of times in the shop, might have even had them in a display tank in my old shop, but I've never kept them at home. So we are going to build this for multifasciatus shell dwellers. They're a great little cichlid from Lake Tanganyika, but when setting up a tank for them, you do need to think about it. There's some things that, well, you need to build into it. Now, other than the light unit I have put on here, these little guys and girls are going to need a little filter that we're just going to jam in the back there. That's just a little internal filter with a bit of foam and a bit of biomedia. And obviously, because they are from the tropical regions of Africa, we need a little heater, which we should be able to hide with some rock work and maybe a few plants. Now, with these shell-dwelling cichlids, they spend most of their time on the bottom of the aquarium, living in old, discarded snail shells. Now, they will like to dig and burrow and move the shells around and almost bury the shells into the sand. So we'll need to move some of that banking at the back to the front, but that fine sand that we've got in there is going to be absolutely perfect. Now, true to cichlid fashion, they are territorial, so we do need some rocks in here. And the rock that we're going to be using is this, which is ocean rock. Now, in most cases, you wouldn't use this rock. As pretty as it looks and with all the holes and the cool textures, this stuff actually raises the pH of the aquarium. So for the good majority of Amazonian species and Southeast Asian species, this stuff is not any good. But because these little cichlids come from Lake Tanganyika, which is a very high pH lake, this stuff is going to be absolutely perfect. And, well, we need to build some barriers because they don't like seeing each other. Now, when I say that these fish don't like to see each other, it's not that they don't want to see each other all of the time and you can't keep them in groups. What I'm meaning is that the males can be quite territorial. So if you've got one little cluster of shells here and one little cluster of shells there, ideally you want to divide it with a wall, not a brick wall, but like an ocean rock wall. Now, one question we used to get asked quite a lot in the shop is, can you put wood in with the African cichlids? And the answer is sort of yes. We're not going to in this one because we are in a really soft water area. And, well, that's just going to be bringing the pH down, and we really want to be building it up. So I think the plan will be is to build some form of refuge in behind here that's open and available for any fish that want to try and get away from the main groups that are going to be out the front. Now, the one thing I love about ocean rock is it locks together really well, so you can build very cool structures out of it. Obviously, if you're using bigger fish, maybe don't go too mad on the structures and glue them all together, because we're going to be using little guys in here. We shouldn't have too many problems, but maybe a couple of blobs of glue just to hold the structure together won't be a bad idea. So I think we can go a tiny bit higher over here, maybe something like that. Yeah, I think that works. And then maybe one last bit up here somewhere. Definitely going to glue this stuff so that we don't have any accidents. Yeah, I think that works. Now, off of that back wall, I'm going to try and divide this tank into several sections. So maybe one here, maybe one here, and maybe one in this back corner, I think. We'll see how we get on with that. I think that bit's too small to be a wall there. Let's try a tool a bit in the back here. And then it can slope down to that bit. This is looking like the bones of like a old mammoth or something. It's proper creepy. I'm actually thinking I might be able to provide them one more home and one more area for refuge by putting that there and trying to bring that across of a wall there, but I need another small bit of ocean rock. This bit might work buried into the sand. Perfect. It's giving off quite good reef tank vibes at the moment. Maybe I should not bother doing this as freshwater and we could do a secondary reef tank maybe. You alright, buddy? How you doing? Anyway, not on the reef tank. So, as you can see, we have divided this into sections. So we can put 3 or 4 shells here, 3 or 4 shells down the middle, maybe a couple here, and then at the back, we've got sort of 2 gaps that we can place some more shells. One little group here, one little group here. So hopefully, if we get males with territory disputes or anything like that, they should be able to get away from each other. But a shell dweller tank isn't complete without shells. Now, excuse my plant delivery. I haven't had time to film the video on those yet, but this was originally going to be where my shell dwellers were going to live. But I've decided that I want to do something different with this tank. I want them to have a bit more space, and that tank is just a slight bit bigger. But in here, we do have a packet of shells and quite a few loose ones. Now, the shells I managed to find are actually just escargot shells for the French restaurant industry, I'm assuming. I've never eaten snail, so don't know what it does, don't know how you do it, but that's what they were labelled as on Amazon. So here we are. They are probably the easiest and cheapest way to get big shells. So well, I suppose we can just scatter them into this tank, can't we? Now, as I say, eventually the shell dwellers will actually just move these around as much as they want. They'll, you know, bury them into the sand. They'll, yeah, chuck them about. They will decide where they want these shells to go. But for the minute, I'm just going to place them randomly throughout this tank. And the little shell-dwelling cichlids that are going to call this tank home can decide where the shells go when they get here. I've just realised I'm going to have to fill all of these shells up with water, because otherwise I'm going to fill this tank with water and they're all just going to plop up to the surface. Now, at the moment, with just the shells in there, it does look a bit strange, but I promise you, once you see the interactions of these fish and how they live and how they, you know, raise their young in the shells, well, we'll probably be a few months away from that, but you get what I mean. It's really awesome to watch them just lurking about. When you come up to the tank, they'll dive into the shells and hide away from you. Yeah, it's going to be cool. Looking forward to it. Now, in theory, you could stop there. That's it. They don't need a lot more. Shell dwellers just need a few rocks to break up the line of sight, a few shells to call home, and that's about it. But we are not going to stop there because I think that looks a little bit boring. I want to do something a bit different with it. So I've been doing my research, and Bucephalandra, which is a lovely little epiphyte plant if you don't already know what it is, should do absolutely fine in the higher pHs that we're going to be running in here. Also, Hygrophila pinnata feeder, which is another sort of epiphyte stem plant, bit of an odd one, that should also do well in a higher pH, and luckily I have both of them. So we're going to do a bit of planting, but not too much. Now, I don't think we will need them all, but I've got a little group of Theia green. I have got 6, but I don't think, well, I don't know, maybe 6. But once I've got those tall plants in the back, probably won't need 6. And then that's the other one, which is pinnata feeder, which, like I say, is a stem plant, but you can grow it as an epiphyte. And with the ocean rock having all those holes in, we should just be able to jam a few sprigs of this in amongst there. Now, we will need to prep all of these plants by removing the pot. Now, you can see how long I've had these by how many roots are coming out the bottom. But if you want to know how to prep plants, there is a video on the channel. But this bit will be fairly boring, so I'm just going to crack on, get all these plants out, and then I'll bring you back for the planting in a second. So the first group of plants are prepped. We've got our pinnata feeder, so let's go for some background planting of these, and then we'll get the Bucephalandra out. So what I'm hoping to do with the stem plants is just find the cracks and crevices and the holes that have been left behind on these pieces of ocean rock, and just essentially place them into it. That's the plan anyway. I think it should work quite well. Now, it will be good to have some sort of jungly plants growing in this aquarium, because shell dweller tanks can be, I don't want to say a pain, but they can be difficult sometimes, because you've got fish that want a fair amount of food, and you've got no plants in there that are really growing fast, or at least most of the time you haven't. So this way I'm hoping to use the Hygrophila as a bit of a nutrient sponge, and then this tank should stay a little bit cleaner. I've found quite a few nice little gaps for these to go in, so once this all settles in and starts all growing upright, it should look quite cool. Pop that one down there. Not sure what the filter will do to these plants, as in some of them are going to grow a bit funny because the filter is going to blast them, but I think that works fine. And then lastly, to help even further with breaking up the line of sight, we've just got a few of these Bucephalandra that I'm hoping to be able to just wedge again in amongst the ocean rock. Not sure where I'm going to wedge that one. I think that one needs a spot of glue in a minute. Oh yeah, nice. Let's get one over here as well. Yeah, I don't think I need 6. I have decided that before we get this filled with water, I'm just going to get a little bit of glue in here, just because I think that one will float. Once it takes root, it will be absolutely fine. But for the initial fill up and the first few weeks that fish are in there and moving stuff around and digging, I don't want them to move that one. So with all of that done, I can get this tank filling and, well, maturing, ready for when the fish come. Oh my word, I forgot I've got to fill up all these shells. They're all floating. Be all right. We'll just place them back later. It's fine. Get a bit of water in them, look. I didn't think of that, did I? There we go. Right. Let's leave this to fill up for a bit, and then I will talk you through some of the additives that I'm going to use in this tank to make it ready, well, for African cichlids that like hard water. So we are nearly full on the aquarium. The last couple of things to do is to add some Optimus to get rid of any chlorines and chloramines, heavy metals, all of that good stuff to make sure it is safe for when the fish go in here in a couple of weeks' time. And also I am going to add some Satus, which is good bacteria. Now in theory there's no fish waste in here yet for it to start consuming, but the plants in there will start breaking down, or a few leaves will start breaking down. Hopefully not all of them will break down, but any of that will mean that the Satus bacteria can start getting on with that and start colonizing the whole aquarium. I better turn that off before that overflows. We better get the filter on and heater on, and then I need to talk to you about one last thing I need to add to make it ready for Rift Lake cichlids. So that is the heater and that is the filter. Now, if you've ever done any research into Lake Tanganyika cichlids, or even their cousins, Lake Malawi cichlids that are just up the road, I say just up the road anyway, you'll have found out that they are from harder water areas, so the pH is generally higher. Now, round where I am, the pH is fairly low. It's not super soft, but it's definitely not there for Lake Tanganyikan cichlids. Now, there are several ways you can do this. The ocean rock will help us bring it up. Using coral sand and all these different things can help bring it up. But to make it easy for me, what I'm actually going to use is some KH Up pH stabilizer. Now that is just a powder that you can use in any harder water fish's aquarium to bring everything up and stabilize everything. I shouldn't need to bring it up massively in here, but it's definitely worthwhile doing. Now you will see people keeping Tanganyikan cichlids in lower pH aquariums and running on tap water and all of that sort of stuff. And it can be done. They are, like I say, being bred more in the hobby rather than being wild caught, and you don't necessarily need to replicate their wild environment. But I have always found that if you replicate their wild environment, or at least go some ways towards it, they always do better. They look more colourful, you get bigger yields of babies. They just tend to do better when you try and get somewhere towards their natural pH. Like I say, all of the ones we're going to be getting are bred in captivity. They've never seen the lake in their lives, so they probably would be more adaptable. But we are going to do this because I know it will be better in the long run. Now, it is no good just going into this with just chucking in this powder. You need to be testing your water and making sure you know what your pH levels are and your hardness levels are before you start doing this. Now, in theory, in this aquarium and with my tap water, I will need to do what I have just done there twice in the next couple of days, and that should bring my pH and KH up, stabilize it, and we should be ready for fish. But remember, everyone's tap water is different. You will see people that are just being able to use straight tap water because their pH comes out of the tap at a higher level than mine does. You may find your tap water is super soft, so you actually have to use more of a powder like that to bring your pH up. It's all to do with testing your water, making sure you know what your pH is, what your hardnesses are, and going from there. This one here, I believe it's 1 level teaspoon per 100 litres. Yep, 1 level teaspoon per 100 litres. Good job I remembered that because I've just dosed that. 1 level teaspoon per 100 litres, and that will bring your levels up by 2 DKH. So test it, check what you're at, check where you need to be, dose the right amount of powder into the tank, super duper, job done. Going forward, in theory, it's only water changes when I'm removing water that I'll need to dose this back into. But remember, everything in your aquarium is pretty much trying to bring your pH down. Your fish poo, your plants, just everything will generally bring your pH down, unless you've got ocean rock, which will be bringing the pH up, or coral sand or so on. It sounds more complicated than it is, but I promise you, once you get into the swing of it, it is easy. I think we're done for today. We need to let the plants settle in. We need to let the tank sort of mature a little bit. And then once the fish are out of quarantine at the shop, I'll be able to go get a group of them. So this is exciting. Yeah, I think that's it. Right, I will see you in the next 5 seconds, which is probably a couple of weeks for me, and we'll be getting fish for this tank. Fingers crossed none of the plants have melted, or at least some of them have survived. We are back. We have left it just under 2 weeks now, and the tank is ready to go. So I have taken some mature biomedia from one of my other aquariums and put it into this filter just to help and speed things along. But before grabbing the fish and getting them acclimatized, I want to change something on the light unit. So this light unit is an AI blade. Now, this video is not sponsored in any way by them. I just had this light unit kicking around that would fit this tank. Oh, the cable's threaded through that leg, so, well, that can go down there for the minute. But I've got these riser legs that should mean the light's a little bit sort of more spread out. With shell dwellers, you don't need any fancy lighting. You don't need expensive lighting. They just need to, well, be able to see what they're doing, and probably you want to see what they're doing. But other than that, you don't need anything fancy for a shell dweller tank. That looks much better. Raises it up, gives light all around the aquarium. We actually get a better ripple as well. So with the light unit raised up, that is the last job I wanted to get done today before getting these shell dwellers acclimatized. And luckily, they are in my jug here. So I've had them in another tank in the house for around a week now. Acclimatizing, settling down, they've been absolutely fine. So I have tested the tank here. The pH is running at about 8. The tank I was keeping them in is running just under 8, about 7.8. So very, very close, very similar. So we'll give them about 45 minutes to acclimatize. We'll just do a few cups in, and then we should be ready to get them in. As I say, check with your local supplier or fish shop or whoever you're using. Just make sure that the pH they're being kept in is something you're matching at home, or you're going to take time to acclimatize them, because the last thing you want to do is to pick them up from a shop that is running them at neutral pH, chuck them into a tank that's a pH of 8 and shock them in that way. It would be much better to bring them home, get them into a normal pH like a 7, 7.2, and then slowly bring the pH up over a number of weeks and get them used to it, rather than just plop. It'd be very stressful. It'd be like taking you from like the Arctic to the Sahara in like 10 seconds. The difference, yeah, wouldn't do them very well. But let's get them acclimatized. Let's get a little jug, and well, I'll bring you all back once we are ready to pour them in, because they are going to look awesome. So we've given the shell dwellers about an hour now. We've done multiple cups of water into the jug. We've emptied the jug once as well, and then refilled it with more cups of water. So they should be ready to go. We've just done a quick pH test in the jug, compared it to what is in the tank, and they are both spot on. So we are ready to catch them out and get them introduced. Now you may be wondering why I've got an upside down plastic plant in the jug with them, and it is literally to give them a few hiding spaces while they are acclimatizing. Obviously I don't want any of them to sort of fight with each other while they're settling down, and yeah, that way they've just got somewhere to hide away from each other if they need to. To give them a bit of a gentler introduction to the tank and allow them to find their homes, we'll flick the lights off and get these 5 little shell dwellers into their new home. I expect they'll find the shells fairly quickly, and all disappear. So it might take an hour or two for them to settle down properly and actually come back out of their shells. And looking in here now, I can already see 1, 2, yeah, 3 or 4 of them are already hiding in the shells. So let's give them an hour or two. I'll bring you back and I'll show you how they're doing. They might have even come out and started digging by then. So we have given them a little bit of time, well, about an hour roughly, and everyone has taken up residence in this half of the aquarium. The shells here and here, completely empty. They prefer this end, which is fine because my chair is like behind me and I can sit at the end of my chair and look straight into the tank and see them, but I did sort of want them to space out a little bit. But it does leave us room when this little group of 5 hopefully start having babies, that there'll be more space and more territories for everyone to move into. I've already seen some territory disputes between them where they're sort of arguing over shells and things, so building those walls and having those different areas of shell is absolutely perfect. And this tank's a bit more of a fish keeper's tank, I suppose you would say, rather than like an aquascaped aquarium. You could still aquascape in an aquarium for multifasciatus if you wanted to, but this one leans a little bit more into being a bit more simple and a bit more designed around the fish. Rather than representing the lake that they normally come from, this is, well, actually something that I'd have built in my fish room years and years ago. I really wanted to do something a little bit different and a little bit quicker with this aquarium, rather than the full-on, you know, aquascaping and messing around with the rocks and trying to get them all in the right angles. This is, like I say, a bit more of a fish house sort of vibe going on. The rocks are going to help me maintain that pH, the plants are going to help me keep the tank clean, the shells are going to provide the homes. There's not a lot else going on, but it really does work well, and I'm hoping it might be something that I can do for the channel. I've got some other bits and pieces and some other fish in mind that could do with more of a fish keeper's tank rather than a full-on planted aquascape that doesn't always lend itself to the fish you're trying to keep. Sometimes it's better actually to think about them than what it's going to look like and making it look perfect. And another thing with designing an aquarium this way for this type of fish is you don't actually need a lot of stuff for it. I was contemplating putting more plants in there, but actually the 6 pots of plants that I put in there would cost you all of maybe £30–35, so it's not horrendous money like putting 20 or 30 potted plants into a full-on aquascape. And I'll be honest, it's the same with the substrate in there. It's just a pure sand base, no expensive plant substrates needed. Yeah, okay, you need a bit more of the rock work, but you could substitute the ocean rock out for maybe slate or maybe pebbles. I might do that in a future one. My first ever Tanganyikan tank was a 4-foot aquarium full of slate, and it worked really well. So an aquarium like this can be a little bit more affordable. You don't need high-end lighting, you don't need ridiculous filtration, you don't need a lot going on in there. And that's what I want to show people. I want to show everyone the different aspects of fish keeping, whether you've got lots of money, whether you want fully planted, whether you just want a few rocks, a few fish and some snail shells. I want to cover it all, and that's why I like this tank. It's a little bit different to what I would normally do. So how long do you think before we're getting babies in here? I really don't think it's going to be long. Watching them arguing at the moment over the shells, I think we're going to get some breeding behaviour fairly quickly. I really do hope that I've got males and females in that group of 5. I'd be severely unlucky if I didn't. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments if there's another fish you'd like me to cover with a bit more of a simple fish keepery style scape rather than the aquascape style ones. Yeah, let me know down in the comments what you'd like to see. I do have a snakehead that needs to go into a new tank. He fell out with his friend, and anyway, long story, but maybe we need to do a snakehead tank soon. I think that could be quite cool. Yeah, well, look forward to seeing you all in the next one, and I know that's what I normally say. I'll see you all in the next one.